Sham Sharadava Nalalida Loka Tranaya Karuna Ghana Ghanatam Sham Sharadava Nalalida Loka Tranaya Karuna Ghana Ghanatam Praptasya Kalyana Gunanavasya Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinda Praptasya Kalyana Gunanavasya Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinda Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinda Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinda Shiradi sorry Mahaprabhu ki Tananita Gita Vaditramadhyam Manasura Sena Mahaprabhu ki Tananita Gita Vaditramadhyam Manasura Sena Romanchakam Pasru Taranga Bhajo Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinda Bhajo Vande Guru Shri Shri Vigrahara Dhana Nityanana Shingaratanema Diramajanado Juktasya bhaktamsa neyunjatapi Vande Guru Shri Charanaravrindam Juktasya bhaktamsa neyunjatapi Vande Guru Shri Charanaravrindam Chaturvidha Shri Bhagavad Prasada Satana Triptam Hari Bhakta Shanghan Chaturvidha Shri Bhagavad Prasada Satana Triptam Hari Bhakta Shanghan Kritva eva tripte Bhajato Shadeva Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinda Vande Guru Shri Shiradikama Vabayora Para Madhura Leela Gunarupanamna Shiradikama Vabayora Para Madhura Leela Gunarupanamna Pratikshana Swa Tanalalupasya Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinda Tanalalupasya Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinda Ne kunja yuno Ratikeli Siddhai Jajali Bhir Yukti Apekshaneya Ne kunja yuno Ratikeli Siddhai Jajali Bhir Yukti Apekshaneya tatrati daksha ativalabhasya bande guru shri charanarvindam ativalabhasya Sakshat haritena samasta shastri uktastatha bhavyataiva sadhavi Sakshat haritena samasta shastri uktastatha bhavyataiva sadhavi Kintu prabhoja priya eva tasya Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam Priya eva tasya Yasya prasada Bhagavat prasado Yasya prasadam Nagati kutapi Yasya prasada Bhagavat prasado Yasya prasada Nagati kutapi Jayam stuvam stasya Yasastrin sandhyam Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam Dhyayam stuvam stasya yasastrin sandhyam Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam Yasastrin Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunavadi Pachatta Deshatarine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Nirvishesha Shunavadi Pakata Deshata Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Prabhu Nityananda Nityananda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Chaitanya Chaitanya Nityananda Gadadhara Shivasari Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Hare Rama, Rama Hariyaraya Nama, Krishna Jadavaya Nama, Jadavaya Madhavaya Keshavaya Nama, Hari Gopal Govindaram Shri Madhusudan, Giridhari Gopinath Madana Mohan, Shri Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Advaita Sita, Hari Guru Vaishnava Bhagavata Gita, Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhattaraguna, Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasaraguna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Hare Rama, Shri Shri Radha Nila Madhav, Radha Nila Madhav Radhe. Jaya Jagannatha Jaya Baladeva Jaya Subhadrama Jaya Sudarshan Chakra. Jaya Sitaram Jaya Sitaram Sitaram Jaya Lakshman Hanuman. Nittai Gora Haribo 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 Nittai Go Haribo 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 Nittai Gurari Pramanande Haribo Jai Vishnu Pada Paramanta Pravajaka Chadya Ashtutara Sarasishimat Iskon Pratishta Bibhiti Samstapakacharya Vaishnava Siramani Gaura Priyajana Krishna Prema Bhakti Datta Patita Pavana His Divine Grace Abhacharavina Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ji Ki Jai Shri Gauriya Guru Varga Patiti Udhari Ki Jai Shri Rup Sanatan Bhatta Raghunatha Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasa Gunasat Goswami Prabhu Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ji Ki Jai Jayananta Kuch Vaishnavindi Ki Jai प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासारि गौर भक्तवृंद की जय जय परम दयाल श्री नित्यानंद प्रभु की जय जय प्रेम नाम संकीर्तन एक जनाक प्रेम पुरुषोत्तम श्री सच्चिदानंद श्रीमान गौरांग चैतन्य महाप्रभु गौर हरि महाप्रणावतार की जय गोलोकेर प्रमधान हरि नाम संकीर्तन जग की जय जुग धर्म हरे कृष्ण महामंत्र की जय बृहद मृदंग ट्रांसलेटर बुक डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन सेवा की जय श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपना राधा कुंज समकुंद गिरिराज गोवर्धन की जय श्री ब्रज वृंदावन मथुरा की जय देलोशिव श्री श्री राधा नील माधव की जय श्री माया पूर्णवद्वीप एक चक्र धाम की जय परम करुण श्री गुरु निताय की जय श्री पुरुषोत्तम क्षेत्र जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की जय श्री श्री जगन्नाथ स्वामी बलदेव प्रभु स्मस्पद्रा देवी सुदर्शन चक्र भगवान की जय भक्ति सर्व विघ्न विनाशन कर सिंहरे भगवान की जय जगंगा माय जमुना माय की जय तुलसी महारानी वृंदे देवी भक्ति देवी की जय बोलो श्रीमती राधारानी की जय समवेत भक्त विंद की जय गौरी प्रमानंदे all glory to the assembly bodies, all glory to the assembly bodies, all glory to the assembly bodies, all glory to Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga Guru Hari.
शृङ्गां दलिता हिरण्यकशिपु तानुभृङ्गां केशवद्रिता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे भवकर कमलवरे नाकाम् अद्भुत शृङ्गां दलिता हिरण्यकशिपु तानुभृङ्गां केशवद्रिता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय केशवद्रिता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे
जय केशवद्रिता
नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय नरसिंहदेव 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 जय प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रहलाद महाराज
जय
जय प्रहलाद महाराज प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रहलाद महाराज जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद जय जय गुरुदेव 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 जय जय गुरुदेव जय गुरुदेव 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 जय जय गुरुदेव विनाशक लक्ष्मी नरसिंहदेव भगवान की जय
जय श्री वृंदाई तुलसी देवाय प्रियाय केशव सत्य विष्णु भक्ति प्रारवे सत्तवताय नमो नमः वृंदाय तुलसी देवाय प्रियाय केशव सत्य विष्णु भक्ति प्रारवे सत्तवताय नमो नमः वृंदाय तुलसी देवाय प्रियाय केशव सत्य कृष्ण भक्ति प्रारवे सत्तवताय नमो नमः जय श्रीमती तुलसी महारानी वृंदा देवी की जय. You listen to Tulsi Prabhu? Yeah. Huh? You want or no? You're not ready? Okay.
Namo Namaha Tulasi Krishna Preyasi Namo Namaha
Tulasi Krishna Preyasi Namo Namaha.
Radha Krishna Seva Pavo Yei Abhilashi
Radha Krishna Seva Pava Hey Abhilashi.
Radha Krishna Seva Pavo Yei Abhilashi Radha Krishna Seva Pavo
Hey Abhilashi.
Yetamara Sharanalo Taravancha Purna
Je tumhara sharanana tara vancha purna.
Krupa kori koro tare Vrindavanavasi
Tumi kripa kori kara tare Vrindavanavasi.
Moraye Abhilas Vilas Kunja Diyovas
Morae Vilas kunde diyava.
Nayane Hari Bosada
Aminayane Divasana Jugala Ruparasi. Eni Vedana Dhara Sakira Nugata Kara. Sevayadi Kara Diye Kara Nidadasi. Inna Krishna Dase Koi.
Namora Hoi
Inna Krishna Dase Koi Enamora. Shri Radha
Govinda Preme Sadayena Basi
Shri Radha Govinda Preme Sadayena Basi. Shri Radha Govinda Preme Sadayena Basi. Sadayena Basi. Namo Namaha Tulasi Krishna Preyasi Namo Namaha Tulasi Krishna Preyasi
Namo Namaha Yani Kani Cha Papani Brahma Chadkani Cha Tani Tani Prana Shanti Pradakshana Namudre
Jani Kani Sapapani Brahma Tadi Kani Sa Tani Tani Panna Santi Prarakshana Pari Pari.
Yani Kani Cha Papani Brahma Chadkani Cha Tani Tani Prana Shanti Pradakshana Pare Pare Kani Cha Papani
Brahma Tadi Kani Sa Tani Tani Panna Santi Prarakshana Pari Pari. Jani Kani Sapapani Brahma Tani Tani Panna Santi Prarakshana Pari Pari. Jani kani satapani brahma tari kani sam tani tani prana santu. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna,
Hare Rama, Hare Rama,
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna
Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama,
Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama,
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Jaya Vrunda Devi, Jaya Vrunda Devi, Jaya Vrunda Devi, Jaya Vrunda Devi.
Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani.
Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani.
Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani. Nitai Bora Haribo, 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 Nitai Bora Haribo, Haribo, Nitai Bora Premanande, Haribo. Shri Vrindai Tulasi Vai Priya Ke Savasatya Vishnu Bhakti Pradede Satavatai Namo Namaha Vrindai. Vrindai Tulasi Vai Priya Ke Savasatya Vishnu Bhakti Pradede Satavatai Namo Namaha. Vrindayai Tulasi Devai Priyai Kesava Satya Krishna Bhakti Prade Devi Satavatai Namo Namaha. Shrimati Tulasi Maharani Vrinda Devi Ki. O Tulasi, beloved Krishna, I bow before you again and again. Many thanks to obtain the service of Shri Radha and Krishna. Whoever takes shelter of you as wishes fulfilled, bestow your mercy upon him, you make him resident of Vrindavan. My desire that you also grant me a residence in pleasure groves of Shri Vrindavan. Thus, within my vision, I will always behold beautiful pastimes of Radha and Krishna. I beg you to make me a follower of the emissaries of Raj. Please give me the privilege of devotional service and make me your own maid servant. This very fallen and lowly servant Krishna praise. May I always swim in love with Shri Radha and Govinda. Srimati Tulasi Maharani Vrinda Devi Ki Jai. For the acting offenses, in matter of chanting the holy name of the Lord, should be avoided. are as follows. 1. Blaspheme with devotees who dedicate a life for propagating the holy name of the Lord. 2. To consider names of demigods, the Lord Shiva, Lord Brahma, to be equal to or independent of the name of Lord Vishnu. 3. To disobey the order of the spiritual master. 4. To blaspheme the Vedic literature or scriptures and pursuance of Vedic version. 5. To consider the glories of chanting Hare Krishna to be imagination. 6. To give some interpretation to the holy name of the Lord. 7. To commit sinful activities in strength of chanting the holy name. 8. To consider chanting Hare Krishna is one of the auspicious ritualistic activities which are often Vedas as fruitive activity, karma kanda. 9. To instruct the fearless person about the glories of the holy name. And 10. To not have complete faith in chanting the holy name and to maintain material attachments even after understanding so many instructions on this matter. It also an offense to be inattentive while chanting. Every devotee who claims to be Vaishnava must carefully guard against these 10 offenses in order to quickly achieve a desired success. Krishna Prema. Now let us offer our most humble obeisance unto all the Vaishnavas, devotees of the Lord. They are just like desired trees. They can fulfill the desires of everyone, and they are full of compassion for the fallen conditioned souls. Jai Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyaivacha Paritanam Pavanibhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namah. Jai Ananta Kochi Vaishnavrindi Ki Jai. Subranga Sang, sorry. Is that what's come up? Shikshakstakam. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Shikshakstakam Ki Jai. Chaito Darpanamajanam Bhavamahada Vagni Nirvapanam Shriyakari Vachandrika Vitaranam Vidyavadhu Jivanam Anandam Buddhivardhanam Pratipadam Purnamrita Swadanam Sarvatmasnam Paramparam Vijayati Shri Krishna Sankirtanam Nam Namakari Baudha Nija Sarva Shaktis Tatrapita Niyamita Shmarane Nakala Ita Drushitava Kripaya Bhagavan Mamapi Durdhaivam Idrishamiya Janina Nuraga Trinadapi Sunichena Tarorapi Saishnuna Amanina Manadena Kirtaniya Sadahari Na Dhanam Na Janam Na Sundarim Kavitam Vacha Gadishaka Maye Mama Janmani Janmanishwari Bhavata Bhakti Rahaitu Kitvai Oi Nandatanu Karam Patitam Mam Visame Bhavambudo Kripaya Tava Pada Pankaja Stita Dhuli Sadrisham Vichintaya Nayanam Galora Shudharaya Badanam Gadarudaya Gira Pulakai Chitam Bapukada Tavanam Grahane Bhavishyati Jugaitam Nimishena Chakrusha Pravrasaitam Shunyaitam Jagata Sarvam Govinda Virahena Me Asli Shava Padaratam Pinashtumam Adarshnar Marmahatam Karotuva Jatha Tathava Vidadatu Lampata Matpranathastu Saivanapara Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Shri Krishtakam Ki Jai Namo Mahavarannaya Krishna Prema Pradayati Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namine Guru Tvishe Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devim Gauravani Pracharine Nivishesha Shunnavadi Pasatyadi Shatarine. Glory to the Sri Krishna Sankirtana, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of a conditional life of repeated birth and death. The Sankirtana movement is the prime benediction for humanity at large, because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and enables us to fully taste the nectar for which all is anxious. O my Lord, your holy name alone can render all benediction to living beings, and thus you have hundreds and millions of names like Krishna and Govind. In these transcendental names, you have invested all your transcendental energies. There are no even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. Oh, my Lord, out of kindness, you enable us to easily approach you by holy names, but I'm so unfortunate that I have no attraction for them. Once you chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself a Lord and stroll in the street, one should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your causeless devotional service, birth after birth. O son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor. Yet somehow or other, I'm falling this ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. Oh my Lord, more will my eyes will be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name. Or will my voice choke up, and will the hairs of my body stand on end at the recitation of your name? Oh Govinda, feeling your separation, I am considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I'm feeling all vacant in the world in your absence. I know no one but Krishna as my Lord, and he should remain so. Even if sandals me roughly by his embrace, or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me, he is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is my worshipful Lord unconditionally. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Sri Kristakam ki jai. Shri Guru Vandana Mangala Charan ki jai. Om Agyanatimirandasya Gananjana Salakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manubhistam Stapitam Jena Bhutali Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Jota Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatha Vintam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitam Cha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paskatya Desatarine Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Iti Namine Shivarsavanavi Devi Daitaya Kripabdaye Krishna Sambandha Vijnana Daine Parame Namaha Madhu Ujjvala Pranandya Shri Rupanuga Bhaktita Shri Gora Karuna Shakti Vigrahaya Namastute Namaste Gauravani Shri Murtaye Dinatarine Rupanuga Viruddha Papasiddhanta Dvantanamine Namo Gora Kishoraya Shaksha Vairagya Murtaye Vipralambara Sambodhe Padambujayate Namaha Namo Bhakti Vinodaya Sachitananda Namine Gora Shakti Swarupaya Rupanuga Varayate Gora Vir Bhava Bhumestvam Nirdista Sajjana Priya Vaishnava Sarvabhama Shri Jagannathayate Namaha Vanchakalpa Turabhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Padayate Krishna Krishna Chaitanya Namne Guru Chuse Namaha Panchatatvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhakta Avataram Bhaktakam Namami Bhakta Kartikam He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Jaitam Charatur Pangor Mama Manda Mater Gati Matsarvasva Padambujo Radha Madana Mohano Divya Vindaranya Kalpadmada Shimad Ratnagara Simhasanastito Shimad Radha Shila Govinda Devo Prastadi Visevimano Smarami Shiman Rasa Rasaram Vivam Sivata Tatastita Karsan Venuswane Gopir Gopinatak Striyeshtana Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanastute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nishananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Today we're going to skip the
And Brahma Samhita goes straight into our Saturday and Sunday children's class. And today our subject is the cancel culture of Mayavadis, atheists, scientists, and philosophers. We will read the verse today. Shrimad Bhagavatam Grantaraj Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Shrimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 7, text number 14. Asesa Slanklesa Saman Vidate Gunanuvada Shravanam Murare Kimva Punastach Charanaravinda Paraga Seva Ratiratma Labda. Asesa, unlimited. Sanklesa, miserable conditions. Saman, cessation. Vidate, can perform. Guna Anuvada, of the transcendental name, form, qualities, pastimes, entourage, and paraphernalia, etc. Shravanam, hearing and chanting. Murare, of Murari, Shri Krishna, the personality of Godhead. Kimva, what to speak of. Puna, again. Tat, his. Charana Aravinda, lotus feet. Paraga Seva, to the service of the favorable dust. Rati, attraction. Atma Labda, those who have gained such self-achievement. Translation by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Simply by chanting and hearing of the transcendental name, form, etc. of the personality of Godhead, Shri Krishna, one can achieve the cessation of unlimited miserable conditions. Therefore, what to speak of those who have attained attraction for serving the flavor of the dust of the Lord's lotus feet. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Two different methods for controlling the material senses are recommended in the Vedic scriptural wisdom. One of them is the process of jnana, or the path of philosophical understanding of the Supreme, Brahma, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. The other is that of direct engagement in the transcendental loving devotional service of the Lord. Of these two most popular methods, the path of devotional service is recommended here as the best, because one on the path of devotional service does not have to wait for the attainment of the fruitive results of pious activities or for the results of knowledge. The two stages of executing devotional service are, first, the stage of practicing devotional service with our present senses under the regulation of the recognized scriptures, and second, attaining sincere attachment for serving the particles of the dust of the lotus feet of the Lord. The first stage is called sadhana bhakti, or devotional service for the neophyte, which is rendered under the direction of a pure devotee, and the second stage is called raga bhakti, in which the mature devotee automatically takes to the various services of the Lord out of sincere attachment. The great sage Maitreya now gives the final answer to all the questions of Vidura. Devotional service to the Lord is the ultimate means to mitigate all the miserable conditions of material existence. The path of knowledge or that of mystic gymnastics may be adopted as a means for the purpose, but unless mixed with bhakti or devotional service, they are unable to award the desired result. By practicing sadhana bhakti, one may gradually rise to the point of raga bhakti, and by performing raga bhakti in loving transcendental service, one can even control the supreme, powerful Lord. Gaur Premanandi Haribol. I know. Yeah. We're going to go over it again. Do you understand this verse? That's why we're going over it again. It's a very important verse. So there's a so-called spiritual movement started by Kripala Maharaj that has a temple in Texas, outside of Austin. And they say, you don't need to do sadhana bhakti. We'll give you directly the Raganuga bhakti, because that's the goal. So we can give it to you directly. So then they mesmerize people, or they hypnotize people to believe that this is actually a bona fide thing. But if you read the commentaries by Srila Rupa Goswami or other great Vaishnava scholars, they say, no, one must follow sadhana bhakti and gradually evolve to Raganuga bhakti. Well, the proof that what they say is true is that both the Kripala Maharaj and his so-called sannyasis, many of them have fallen down and engaged in all kinds of abominable activities. Because without going slowly through sadhana bhakti, one will so-called have Raganuga bhakti right away, and one will have still mundane, let's say, understanding of what it means, and engage in illicit activities. It's very easy to do that because one has not given up completely the desire for sense gratification. It takes a long time, and Krishna consciousness is a slow process. It's not overnight. Although one can surrender overnight, one can be initiated rather quickly, 1 or 2 years after surrendering and following the rules and regulations. But just like you can turn off a fan, but it doesn't completely stop. It can take some time for it to actually come to a complete stop. In the same way, one may go through the activity of Krishna consciousness on the bodily level, like controlling the senses somewhat, but the real goal of the yoga system is to control the mind. And it's not that easy to do because we've gone through hundreds and millions of births and deaths engaging in sense gratification in different bodies and different planets around the universe. And we're fortunate enough to come to the human body now, and not only that, but a civilized human body. The difference between civilized and uncivilized is that the human body that is civilized is regulated, and according to the principles of Krishna consciousness, going to bed early, waking up early, coming to Mangala Aarti, chanting one's rounds, and Brahma Muhurta. All these things are regulations that are highly recommended. And if you don't chant all your rounds in the early morning hours, in the Brahma Muhurta period, you can still chant your rounds, but it's more difficult. And the quality of the rounds may not be as good as the ones you chant so early in the morning. So therefore, it is highly recommended to take rest early and wake up very early and be able to chant very focused and sincere rounds, and also have darshan of the deities, bow down to them, and Tulsi Aarti, etc., and hear the class, and have prasadam. Then one has got their vaccination for the rest of the day to not be attracted by Maya. So this verse is basically summarizing what is the program that Lord Chaitanya also advocated very emphatically, that simply by chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, sincerely, and taking prasadam, and coming on Sankirtan, and regularly hearing classes on Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, and associating with devotees and engaging in devotional service in the temple and preaching, one can easily cross beyond all the obstacles in Kali Yuga to attaining Krishna consciousness and go back to Godhead. In fact, the whole process becomes very easy. It's not complicated. And one does not have to go through the traditional process of Krishna consciousness. The traditional process of Krishna consciousness is you have to spend time being trained in Sanskrit and learning different mantras and rituals and working for in karma yoga, trying to give up attachment to the results, offering the results to the Lord, and getting initiated. All these different things, are let's say gradual development, and then obviously in the beginning stages, one's service is not pure devotional service because one still has desires, and then all those desires have to disappear and be replaced by desires to please Krishna, and so forth. And then studying the Vedas and also memorization, and also going to different seminars here, there, listening to different speakers, and eventually one becomes purified. However, it is possible to skip a lot of those things. Not that they are not important, they're certainly very important, but by the process of chanting purely and being completely dedicated to devotional service in the association of devotees and following strictly the regulative principles, one can very quickly make spiritual advancement, purify their heart of material desires, and be completely focused on Krishna without any other obstacle, giving up attachment and detachment. One cannot be attached nor detached, but one can be dedicated to Krishna. Attachment is unfavorable. Detachment is also unfavorable to material things. But because detachment in material things means you won't use them in Krishna's service. So attachment and detachment are also signs of being still materially affected. But to be completely dedicated to Krishna and offer everything to Krishna, that is the position of a pure devotee. So in the 8th chapter, 28th verse in the purport, it says, "The beauty of Krishna consciousness, however, is that by one stroke, by engaging in devotional service, one can surpass all the rituals of the different orders of life." So there it is. That's the very significant statement that Prabhupada is making. That doesn't mean that we become some kind of a prophet or a miracle man or woman overnight. It means simply that the process of devotional service, pure devotional service, is so powerful that one could be purified in a very short period of time and engage in 100% Krishna consciousness. The beauty of Krishna consciousness, however, is that by one stroke, by engaging in devotional service, one can surpass all the rituals of the different orders of life. Okay, so that being said, this verse today is what you would say a quintessential verse that encompasses the core understanding of the Hare Krishna movement, and that is simply by chanting and hearing of the transcendental name, form, etc. of the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, one can achieve the cessation of unlimited miserable conditions. Therefore, what to speak of those who have attained attraction for serving the flavor of the dust of the Lord's lotus feet? So, in the 4th chapter, also 9th verse, it is said, Janma karma chame divyam evam yo veti tatvata tyakvadeham punarjanma naiti mameti sarjana. So this verse basically is saying the same thing. It means that for one who knows the transcendental nature of my, meaning Krishna's, appearance and activities, does not, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode, or Arjuna. So the knowledge of Krishna, which should lead to unalloyed devotional service for Krishna, is so powerful that it can liberate a person very quickly from the cycle of birth and death. And it says, the Lord's descent from his transcendental abode is already explained in the 6th verse. Well, that's Ajopi-san avyayatma bhutanam ishvaropi-san. One who can understand the truth of the appearance of the personality of Godhead is already liberated from the material bondage, and therefore he returns to the kingdom of God immediately after quitting this present material body. Such liberation of the living entity from material bondage is not at all easy. The impersonalists and the yogis attain liberation only after much trouble and many, many births. Even then, the liberation they achieve, merging into the impersonal Brahma Jyoti of the Lord, is only partial, and there is the risk of returning to this material world. But the devotee, simply by understanding the transcendental nature of the body and activities of the Lord, attains the abode of the Lord after ending this body and does not run the risk of returning to this material world. In the Brahma Samhita 5.33, it is stated that the Lord has many, many forms and incarnations. Advaitam achyutam anadim anantarupam adyam purana purisham navayovanam cha videsa durlabam adurlabam atma bhakto govindam adipurisham tamaham bhajami. Although there are many transcendental forms of the Lord, they are all still one and the same Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now that is a mystery. Just like the appearance of the Lord is a mystery. He appears in a four-handed form as a little baby. And his mother becomes very worried that if Kamsa comes down and sees my Lord with four hands, my child with four hands, he'll know this is definitely God or Narayana, and he'll kill him. So please, she prays, please change your form into a two-handed form like an ordinary human being. Of course, Krishna follows his mother's instruction, and she feels relieved because now he only has two hands, so Kamsa won't think that he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So why does she think that her son with two hands is not the Supreme Personality of Godhead? Because she's under the influence of Yoga Maya. Otherwise, she would not be able to treat the child as an ordinary child that she loves, not because it's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because she's fully in love with her child and fully dedicated to protecting her child and serving her child. So her pastime as a mother could not take place if she knows that her child is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is a mystery. If someone tells you, well, in our religion we believe that God first appears with four hands as a little baby, but then because his mother says so, he changes his body into two-handed form. And people say, what? That's a bunch of nonsense. I don't believe that. Right? So it's a mystery. And unless we hear on a regular basis Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, we will not understand the real meaning of this mystery, because it's a mysterious thing. How can someone do such a thing, especially a little baby that's just born? Okay, so, and then how can this person expand himself into so many different forms, like a half lion, half man, or like a tortoise, or like a fish, a gigantic fish, and so forth. So all these things are mysterious, and most people will say it's nonsense. I don't want to hear any more about this. So one time, this one Christian lady. I was preaching to her, and I told her how Krishna is always a pristine young youth. She said, "Well, I don't believe that." I said, "What do you mean you don't believe that?" She said, "No. How can he always remain young? God is, he's older. He's an older person. He's got wisdom. Wisdom grows with age." I said, "Well," I said, "that's a mistake. Of course, if you want to believe that, you can, but that's a mistake. God is not subject to to a changing body because he has an eternal body. It's made of Sat, Chit, Ananda, Vigor, High, eternity, bliss, and knowledge." He said, "Oh, I don't believe all that." I said, "Okay, what are you going to do? You can't argue with people that don't want to listen and don't want to believe things that are true." So we see it's very difficult for most people to become Krishna conscious because they have to believe things that they've been taught is not true. So that's the subject of today. We're going to talk about what's called the cancel culture of the Mayavadis, the atheists, the scientists, and the philosophers. What does it mean, cancel culture people? These people cancel things that are true and limit people's ability to be liberated from the cycle of birth and death and go back to Godhead. The Mayavadis are the worst of all the cancel culture people and the most blasphemous of Krishna. They say that they are Kevala Advaitins. That means they believe in absolute oneness. What does that mean? What does that infer? It infers, number one, that they don't believe that there is individuality, that all the individuality we see in this material world is false. It's an illusion. And there's only one reality, that's the Brahman effulgence. And there's nothing beyond Brahman. So they cancel out, one, all the living entities, all the jivas. Number two, they cancel out Vaikuntha and Goloka and all the liberated souls. And Krishna, who is supposed to be transcendental to the material nature and always existent in the spiritual world. They cancel all that. They also say, well, if there is someone like Krishna who comes to this material world, he has a material body. He doesn't have a spiritual body. So they cancel that also. Then they say that the material world itself is an illusion. It's not real. It's a figment of the mind. And they cancel the whole material world. And along with that, they cancel the possibility of performing devotional service to the Lord and developing love and affection and having personal relationship, such as neutrality and servitorship and friendship and parental and conjugal. They cancel all that. And they say there's only one thing, that's the Brahman. And to merge into that, you have to deny your own individuality. So you have to deny your own individuality to merge into that. And you have to be able to perceive things that are imperceptible. So, and you meditate on imperceptible things. So you tell me if that's possible to do. So in this way, they are the worst of the worst. They're worse than the atheists. They're worse than the scientists and speculator philosophers and the modern educationalists, teachers who are following the pedagogy of atheistic humanism. And in other words, they're the worst of the worst. And they are the worst blasphemers of Krishna. And they say it doesn't have a body, just like the Arya Samajis. They say, oh, we believe in God, but it doesn't have a body. What? How can you believe in God then if he doesn't have a body? And he's not a person. He's an it. Right? So you see where all these pronouns come from. They come originally from the Mayavadis, right? Like nowadays you have to give your pronouns so people can refer to you, right, with the right pronouns. So some people say, refer to me as it. And somebody else says, well, no, refer to me as he, she. So things are going crazy in America. But the Mayavadis are the ones that started it all, you see. And not just a few thousand years ago, almost from the beginning of time, they've been around. Okay, so they're referred to as Kevala Advaitins because they're attached to the false idea that the absolute truth is impersonal. They say that the material world is an illusion and that the individual souls in the material world are also illusions. They believe there is only one soul, and that is the impersonal Brahmajyoti. They also reject the existence of the supreme world and its inhabitants in Vaikuntha and Goloka. They say that when Krishna appears in the material world, he has a material body, and he is the sum total of tamasa buddhi. And this is the most insulting thing that they say about Krishna. That means that he is ignorance posing as knowledge. This is how nasty they are, right? And I would say more than 90% of the gurus in India are Mayavadis, people who actually believe all this blasphemous nonsense. Right? That's why India is in turmoil, and people become sort of, mesmerized by these Mayavadi teachers, and they follow them. And then when they come to Krishna consciousness, they have difficulty trying to understand it because the Mayavad philosophy is diametrically against almost everything in Krishna consciousness. So this is a serious thing. And even if they attain Brahman effulgence, because of all the false theories that they have, they'll fall down. Because there's no devotional service in the Brahmajyoti. There's only devotional service in hell. There's devotional service in the middle planets. There's devotional service in the upper planets. There's devotional service in Vaikuntha. There's devotional service in Goloka. But there's no devotional service in the Brahmajyoti. So therefore, and they don't believe there's anything beyond the Brahmajyoti. Therefore, they are destined to fall down and start all over again. Okay, so then there are the atheists, the second group of the cancel culture. Cancel means they cancel things that are true, and they say it's not true, right? So the next thing is the atheists. The atheists do not believe in the existence of God and any supernatural beings like demigods. They reject the existence of the spiritual world and liberated beings there. They claim that after death of the material body, there's nothing. And there's no hell, there's no life after death, because there is no eternal soul, only the body made of material elements. And those material elements dissipate. In other words, you stop existing as a material body. And they claim life on Earth started by chemical or atomic or material random combinations over a very long period of time. They espouse the goal of life as the seeking of material pleasures as much as possible. And there are more things that they say that are nonsense. So here we see that the whole educational system in America is based on atheistic humanism, which believes all these things, right? So how do you expect your child to be initiated, child to be educated, when they're taught all these things that are not true? There's nothing after death. We can't scientifically establish the existence of God. Therefore, for us, there's no God, and there's no spiritual world. There's no eternal soul. You just have this body, and this body is limited to how many years, right? 60, 80, maybe 100 years. Therefore, they have shrunk down your consciousness to 60 or 80 years, and with no possibility of any, what you would call, liberation from the cycle of birth and death. You only have this one life. You see how it shrinks down to a very, very small field of activity, and they deny you the ability to understand your eternal soul and the relationship of the soul with Krishna, and the existence of devotional service that could mitigate all material miseries, even in this life, in this material body. They cancel all that out, and therefore all you have is a few years of sense gratification and selfishness and self-aggrandizement at the expense of others. So we see how nasty the atheists are. But the Mayavadis are even worse. You have to remember that. They're even worse. And that good, you have to be really bad to get worse than the atheists. That's how bad the Mayavadis are. So then there's the scientists and speculative philosophers. They have varied opinions based mostly on speculation. For example, Socrates and Plato believed that there is a spiritual world, but it's static and populated by perfect forms that are static, that don't move, they're not animated. Aristotle, who was a disciple of Plato, he rejected the existence of a spiritual world completely and said there's only the material world. And he's the father of modern so-called atheistic science. Okay, so those are, I didn't go into all the different ramifications of the nonsense of the scientists and speculative philosophers. I will later on, because there's so much there, it would require a much longer explanation. And then there's a modern education based on atheistic humanism that doesn't believe that there's God, etc. We've already talked somewhat about that. But now we come to the two big tickets of nonsense. False self-limitations due to ignorance and rejectance of the existence of Krishna as God. Well, when you begin to believe these false things that are being taught in schools today, that are being written about by speculative scientists and philosophers from ancient times right up till today, what happens? One becomes dramatically limited. Now, I already spoke about it, but I'm going to speak about it in more depth now. The limitations we put on ourselves that are all false and artificial and only due to misconceptions. They're not real. First of all, we have to admit that we're already limited by nature, which means that we're all subject to birth, old age, disease, and death. We have no choice there. No one remembers choosing to be born. No sane person is choosing to get sick or get old or to die. Therefore, these things are forced on us. And we should ask the question, why are they forced on us? Well, there's an easy answer to that. It's because we've made mistakes in the past. We've had past lives and we've made mistakes. And therefore, we have what's called a mixed bag of karma. That means it's a mixture of good and bad things that we've done in previous lives. And because of that, we get a particular type of body, born in a particular geographical place, and also with specific types of parents and relatives and so forth. So all these things are more or less predetermined by our karma. So we're all carrying baggage, as they say in English. And the baggage is a very severe baggage. Some people are a little less severe. Other people, medium severe, medium type. And some people, very, very bad. Mostly all bad things. So then these limitations by nature are so severe. I mean, I'm going to go through them now. The first is birth, death, old age, and disease. Then there are the three modes of material nature. There is goodness, passion, and ignorance. These things are supernatural forces controlled by the devatas that control us and control our activities, so that we're actually not independent. Nobody is independent. No living entity is independent. We are all being controlled by these three modes. And you cannot really begin devotional service unless you free yourself of the influence of the three modes of material nature. Yesam twantagatam papam jananam punya karmanam te dvandam mohanir mukta janti mandrita rataha, the 7th chapter, 28th verse. It says that one has to be completely free of the influence of the modes of material nature to begin devotional service. So, if you follow the 4 things you promise at initiation, that is to chant at least 16 good rounds every day and eat only prasadam and regularly hear Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam every day, spoken by genuine devotees, not by speculators. And number 4, to associate with devotees and engage in devotional service. And that would mean also to not only serving in the temple, but also going out on Sankirtan. If you do those 4 things, you will very quickly rise above the influence of the 3 modes of material nature. Therefore, you can begin devotional service. And by initiation, your karma is put on hold. It's not eliminated. It's put on hold. It gets eliminated by regularly coming to class every day. Little by little, all the millions and billions of sins that we have committed in previous lifetimes are stripped away or peeled off or destroyed until we have only pure desires to please Krishna. Okay, so then there are the 3 types of miseries, adhyatmika, adhibodhika, adhidaivika. These are also limitations by nature on us. These are also controlled by the devas. So those are miseries caused by this body, miseries caused by other living entities, and miseries caused by cataclysmic events, hurricanes, tsunamis, earthquakes, and so forth. And we have no control of these things, and we're always subjected to them. And then there are there's lust, anger, greed, and madness, illusion, and envy. These also limit us. And as long as we're not Krishna conscious, we're influenced by these things. And they control us. And we do things that are self-destructive because of these things. And then there are, the worst thing of all is the false ego. And the false ego is a big subject. It says, Dayato visham pumsa sangat techu pajayate sangat sanjayate kama kama kruda pajayate krudahad bhavati samhohas samahad smriti ribhama smriti bhamsat buddhinaso buddhinasat pranasyate. While contemplating the objects of the senses, one develops attachment. And as that attachment grows, one becomes lustful, or one develops lust. And when lust is frustrated, one becomes angry. And when one becomes angry, there is illusion and delusion. So illusion is you believe something, you make a mistake perceiving something, and you believe that that mistake is true. And then that's an illusion. And then, in other words, you believe something that was never true at any time, but you believe that it is true. And then you act on it. So that's called delusion. There's illusion and delusion once there's after anger. And then there's, because of that delusional state where you're saying, oh yeah, well, I believe that by smoking marijuana, I can go back to Godhead. See, now, these are the type of nonsense things people believe. One time this man came to our restaurant years ago, My Sweet Lord restaurant, and I asked him, I said, you believe in God? He said, nope. I said, why not? He said, well, I believed in God when I was younger. I was going to school. But when I got to college, I read a book, and the book said God doesn't exist. So I don't believe in God anymore. So this is going on all over the world. And by the way, it was just announced recently that in England, the Christians who believe in God are a minority now for the first time, because many people have become atheists in England. English philosophers are the worst in the world. They're right there with the French and the philosophers. They're nonsense, complete nonsense. The Germans are a little bit better, but the worst are the British. So anyway, and the same thing's happening in the United States, that if you count each Christian sect individually, now there are more atheists than certain sects of Christianity in the United States. And eventually, there'll be more atheists than all the Christians put together. So we see that the atheism, because of the modern educational system, is advancing very, very fast in the United States as well as other European countries and so forth. So this verse says, while contemplating objects, sensitive person develops attachment for them, and from such attachment lust develops, and from lust anger, and from anger there is illusion and delusion, and eventually there is it develops into bewilderment of memory. When the memory is bewildered, one's intelligence is lost, and then one falls down. So this is happening on a massive level all over the world to people. It begins by not seeing correctly. And therefore, the word for philosophy in Sanskrit is darshan, how to see. Now, the word for philosophy in English is philosophy, the love of wisdom, right? So there's a major difference between the understanding of philosophy in the Western world and the understanding of philosophy in India or in the Vedic tradition. When it says darshan, it's how you see, just like a mother sees her child with love and devotion and desire to protect her child. And a pervert sees the same child with the desire to exploit it for sense gratification. And it happens a lot in America. Young kids and even babies sometimes are kidnapped by strangers to exploit them. In fact, at least once a month or once every couple months, in the newspaper you'll see, or in the news you'll see, somebody cut open a pregnant woman and stole the child and killed the woman. They actually cut the womb, take the baby out, and kill the woman, and they steal the child. It just happened. There was in the news just 3 or 4 days ago. You say, have you ever heard that? Yeah. So these are the crazy things that are happening today. They probably happened in the past also, because there have been demons all the time. So we need to understand the importance of developing Krishna consciousness to stop all this terrible slaughter that's taking place in the world. Slaughter of animals, slaughter of plants, and slaughter of people. Okay, so then in the Bhagavad Gita, the development of the false ego is a big subject because once we develop the false ego, it affects the whole consciousness of our life. And it definitely affects in a big way the intelligence and the mind. And then after that, one is engaged in all kinds of self-destructive activities, eating meat, gambling, illicit activities, and intoxication. Okay, so it says in the 3rd chapter, 37th verse, Shri Bhagavan Uvacha, Kama Esa Krodha Esa, Raja Guna Samudbhava, Mahasana Mahapapma, Vidi Enam Iha Vairinam. The Supreme Personality of God has said, it is lust only, Arjuna, which is born of contact with the material mode of passion and later transformed into wrath or anger and which is the all-devouring sinful enemy of this world. Well, guess what? This whole world of publicity and different types of enticements is based on increasing lust in children and adults and in everybody. All publicity today is based on increasing lust. Like, for example, you'll see, based on the Freudian psychology, that in America, in order to sell a product, they have to give something that entices the person to take notice of their product. So oftentimes, like, let's take the example of a muscle car. A muscle car are these big pickup trucks that are like very powerful. So there's always a lady in a bikini standing next to it and pointing to it and smiling, right? So the psychological purport is, you want the lady, you got to buy the truck. So that's going on all over the place in advertisement in America today and around the world. You see it all the time. So that association of the possibility of sense gratification enhanced by purchasing the product. Like, for example, you'll see this, there's an advertisement of a so-called thing that was invented. You put it on your fat belly, and it reduces your belly, and you become ripped, as they say in English. You know, you develop these abs, and you look like, you know, Superman, right? And they give all this publicity about it, how, you know, that this was started by one member of elite fighters trained in America, and he figured out this way of putting this thing on. He created this thing that vibrates with electricity and reduces your fat and makes you ripped. You have these very, very powerful abs or abdominal muscles. So anyway, this is all nonsense. It doesn't really work that much, but people buy it. Why? Because they want to look like Tarzan. And they want to, and they buy it before summer, so that when they go out on the beach in summer, they look like, they walk around like Tarzan, you know, and they become a desirable person in the eyes of women, for example. So anyway, this is all nonsense, but it's based on increasing lust. And then it says that the sense of love of God becomes transformed into lust, as milk in contact with sour tamarind is transformed into yogurt. Then again, when lust is unsatisfied, it turns into wrath. Wrath is transformed into illusion, and illusion continues the material existence. Therefore, lust is the greatest enemy of the living entity, and it is lust only which induces the pure living entity to remain entangled in the material world. This is serious stuff. This is very serious. This is explaining why so many people are not Krishna conscious, and why there are even people who are Krishna conscious who fall down, because as soon as they begin to associate with lusty people and lusty advertisements or movies or whatever, books, then it's very possible that they can fall down from Krishna consciousness, even though they're initiated. And we see that happen a lot. And how about the people who are not Krishna conscious? Well, there's very little hope for them, because they're completely controlled by this all-powerful enemy called kama, krodha, lust and anger and greed and lobha. Okay, so then wrath or anger is the manifestation of mode of ignorance. These modes exhibit themselves as anger and other corollaries. Okay, so love of Krishna can be transformed into lust very easily. That's how people fall down, even from the spiritual world. And then once you're lusty, it's very difficult, almost impossible to go back to love for Krishna. It's very difficult. People have a very difficult time. It's possible, but it's very difficult. Okay. Then it says, Duman nav riyate vahnir yata darso malena cha yatol men avrita garbas tata tenidam avritam. As fire is covered by smoke, as a mirror is covered by dust, or as the embryo is covered by the womb, the living entity is similarly covered by different degrees of this lust. So this is Bhagavad Gita 3:38. So, in other words, there's three examples given there. Fire covered by smoke, a mirror covered by dust, or an embryo covered by the womb. So these are 3 degrees of covering of the living entity, of us, by which the pure consciousness is obscured, or pure consciousness is more or less covered over, and we become full of wrong ideas and beliefs. Okay, so when there's smoke and fire, dust on a mirror, or the womb about the embryo. So when lust is compared to smoke, it's understood that the fire of the living spark can be very slightly perceived. In other words, when the living entity exhibits his Krishna consciousness slightly, he may be likened to fire covered by smoke. Although fire is necessary where there is smoke, there is no overt manifestation of fire in the early age. This stage is like the beginning of Krishna consciousness. So there's something there, but it's not clear. But it can. An expert person who knows how to separate the smoke from the fire can help a person by training them in Krishna consciousness, and then the fire becomes very strong, the fire of spiritual life. Then dust on a mirror refers to the cleansing process of the mirror of the mind by so many spiritual methods. The best process is to chant the holy names of the Lord, and in other words, you see something when there's a dusty, dirty mirror, but you don't see it clearly. So that's a second stage of covering. But if you take up the chanting Hare Krishna and associating with devotees, eventually you can clean the mirror of the mind. And then the third is the embryo is covered by the womb, or the baby, or not the baby, but the embryo is covered by a womb. This is the most covering. So in other words, it's compared to like trees. Trees are also living entities, but they have very, very limited consciousness. Therefore, they can stand in one place for sometimes 5,000 years and suffer all the time and be able to tolerate it because their consciousness is so low. So a baby wrapped up in the womb of the mother has that type of consciousness. It's very, very, very limited. Otherwise, they would go crazy, being all tightly, tied up in the womb of a mother, and sometimes mother might eat patak, what do you call that? Patak's condiment, and then burn the body of the baby with those hot chilies that's in the patak. What do you call it? Patak. Anyway, condiment. So, therefore, or the mother goes to like Disneyland or someplace like that and gets on a roller coaster, So the baby inside is in extreme, stress by those type of activities of a mother or other type of nonsense activities. So, but the baby can't do anything, can't move hardly, right? As it gets older, a little bit more progressed, and its arms and legs, it starts kicking. get me the heck out of here as fast as possible. I'm suffering. My mom eats junk food, and there's these bugs, and these things are biting my skin, and I can't do anything about it. And so it's and then the baby is like this. You can take a X-ray, and the baby is like this. Why is it like this? It's praying. Please, Krishna, I know I did a lot of mistakes in my previous life, and I promise you, if I get out now and you save me, I'm going to be your devotee, right? Well, as soon as they're born, and everyone starts pampering the baby forgets all those things and just becomes an ordinary person in ignorance. So, there are these three types of coverings of the soul. And so then it says, 339, Avritam Jnanam Etena. Thus, the wise living entity's pure consciousness becomes covered by his eternal enemy in the form of lust, which is never satisfied and which burns like fire. So in the Manu Samhita it is said that lust cannot be satisfied by any amount of sense gratification. In other words, you see that once a person is attached to sense gratification, they can't stop. And it gets so bad that they will actually perform criminal activities to exploit other people for their lusty desires. Now, the lustiest people are ghosts because they don't have a gross body, but they have unlimited material desires. So the only way they can satisfy those desires is if they seize the body of someone else. And if you ever see a person walking down the street talking to themselves, that person is seized by a ghost. Now, sometimes now people have the telephone. It looks like they're talking to themselves, but they're actually talking to someone else. But there are people that don't have that thing in their ear, and they're actually talking to themselves. They are actually ghostly haunted, right? But anyway, here it says that the advancement in the material world, the center of all activities is sense gratification. And thus, this material world is called Maituna Agara, or the shackles of sense gratification, or sex. An advancement of material civilization on the basis of sense gratification means increasing the duration of the material existence of a living entity. So, what kids are learning in school today, and in publicity, in books, social media, it's all about increasing lust. And it means it's increasing the duration of the time they're going to remain in the cycle of birth and death. And there's no guarantee what kind of body they'll have in the next life. So while one enjoys sense gratification, it may be that there is some feeling of happiness. But actually, the so-called feeling of happiness is the greatest enemy of the person. That little bit of happiness one feels by engaging in sense gratification, that is our enemy, because that convinces us to put up with all the other nonsense in our life, working like a donkey day and night, trying to bring in money and paying bills and paying taxes and all this stuff. It convinces us to go through all that misery just for that little bit of sense gratification. So that little bit of sense gratification is the biggest enemy of the living entity. Therefore, this lust is a simple symbol of ignorance by which the living entity is kept within the material world. Okay, and then it continues. It gets worse and worse. 3rd chapter, 40th verse. The senses, the mind, and the intelligence are the sitting places of this lust. Through them, lust covers the real knowledge of living entity and bewilders him. So, we all have this problem. If someone says, no, I don't have any lust, I'm okay, they're lying. This problem is there for everyone. But there is a solution. It's called Krishna consciousness. And Prabhupada writes, the enemy, lust, has captured different strategic positions in the body of the conditioned soul, and therefore Lord Krishna is giving hints of those places, so that one who wants to conquer the enemy may know where he can be found. Mind is the center of all the activities of the senses. And thus, when we hear about sense objects, the mind generally becomes a reservoir of all ideas of sense gratification. And as a result, the mind and the senses become the repositories of lust. Next, the intelligence department becomes the capital of such lustful propensities. Intelligence, lusty intelligence influences the spirit soul to acquire the false ego and identify itself with matter. And thus, with the mind and senses, the spirit soul becomes addicted to enjoying the material senses and mistakes this as true happiness. This false identification of the spirit soul is very nicely explained in Srimad Bhagavatam 10.84.13. Yasyatma buddhir kunape tridatuke swadi kalatradisu bahomna ijnati yatirtha buddhir salile nakarichid janasya avidyesu sa eva gochara. A human being who identifies this body made of three elements with his self, who considers the byproducts of the body to be his kinsmen, who considers the land of birth worshipable, and who goes to the place of pilgrimage simply to take a bath rather than meet men of transcendental knowledge, there is to be considered like an ass or a cow. Well, that's a very important verse. Identifying with the body, identifying with relatives, identifying with the home and hearth and the place where one was born or the country that one comes from, and engaging in ritual activities, not really to make spiritual advancement, but to gain benefits from the devatas, and go to holy places, but not really to meet genuine saintly persons and be instructed by them, but simply to take a bath in a so-called sacred river or tank. That is actually a waste of time. So a human being who identifies this body made of three elements with his self, who considers the byproducts of the body to be his kinsmen, who considers the land of birth worshipable, and who goes to the place of pilgrimage simply to take a bath rather than meet men of transcendental knowledge, there is to be considered like an ass or a cow. Okay, so there's more to this, but homework for next week is to study the genesis or the origin of the false ego and write an essay explaining it. And you have to look at third chapter at the end. There's about 6 verses that explain this. And also in the 15th chapter, 5th verse, also explains this. And that you can do more research in the Srimad Bhagavatam also, or Bhagavad Gita. So that's the homework for next week. Did anyone do their homework for this week? Yes. You sent it to me, but there was nothing in there. Okay. You want to read it? You have to get the microphone. When you do it yourself. So you can do it. You can read it next week if you do your homework. Okay, hurry up. Okay, in the meantime, are there any questions? Any questions? Oh, he has a question.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj.
Haribol.
Quick question. How to identify a lust versus the duties? Because we think that something, like for example, we should have a car, right, to go to office and all. Whether it is we are buying it for our luxury, or how how to differentiate? On what point we can say that we are in the lusty mode, and what point we are saying it's a necessity?
Well, it depends what you're going to do with the car. Right? Are you going to go to the movies or Disneyland with the car? Are you going to go to the casino with the car, or the bar, or the Bhangra in Bellevue in a bar? Or are you going to use the car to come to the temple, or go to work and earn an honest living, then come back home, spend time with your kids, chant Hare Krishna, offer the food, so it's prasadam, and read Bhagavad Gita to your kids, or just do nothing but nonsense with the car, right? And the house, and the kitchen, right? What are you going to cook in the kitchen, right? So it depends on how you use these things. If you use them in the service of Krishna, then they're not detrimental. If you use them for sense gratification, then it's detrimental and sinful, actually.
And also where confusion happens, there are so much variations. Like
What?
if there are a lot of choices. Say if you want to buy a house, the house may be 2 bed. It will be someone wants 2 bed, 3 bed, 4 bed. It's also depends on the.
Well, it just depends how many people are in your family. If it's just you and your wife, you don't need, a 4-bed house.
Yeah, but see, then if that is the case, why everybody are going and buying such a big house and big car?
We're not interested in those people. We're interested in the people who are minimalists.
Even I see the devotees also, they buy very expensive houses and all. How we can.
Well, it depends where that house is. If it's closer to the temple, so they can, like, for example, I know one person, he's a devotee. He used to live in Bellevue, so they couldn't come to the temple that much. Right? So they purposely bought a house in the neighborhood. But once they bought that house, they come less now than they did when they were living in Bellevue. So what was the purpose of buying the house, right? Closer to the temple. If you're going to come less than you did when they were living in Bellevue. So see, that's what happens when you don't listen regularly to classes. You all of a sudden, take things for granted and don't strictly follow anymore. Yes.
I have a question around what you mentioned in the beginning about Kevala Dvaita. So, because we are talking about this Mayavadi philosophy, and, they juggle a lot around, people. So their claim is that they consider Upanishads as the highest, right?
They reject other things. Thank you for bringing that point up. They reject the Mahabharata. They reject the Puranas.
So they consider...
They reject Srimad Bhagavata.
Exactly. So
and Bhagavad Gita, because it's in the Mahabharata.
Yeah, so I mean...
I forgot about that,
Yeah, so they basically say that they consider Shruti as Pramana, and Smriti they consider as a secondary text. So my question, because for us, Bhagavatam is natural commentary on the Brahma Sutra. So I had a question on, how do we reconcile, and how do we take it forth from there, and how do we
reconcile? How can you reconcile with something that's nonsense? It's not possible. No, you have to defeat it.
Exactly. How do we defeat it?
Like this, like what I just talked about, right? They're reducing your potential to 60 to 80 years with no sense of real liberation from the cycle of birth and death. Even if they attain Brahman, and very few of them do, they will fall down because they think there's nothing beyond it. So it's nonsense. That's why it's called Mayavad. They're worshiping something that's not real. So, but you have to explain it to people. Look at all the detail I went through, explaining it, right? And there's more. I'm just skipping over a lot of things.
Where is this from? Can we get a copy of it?
It's all from. Yeah, I can give you a copy.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
It's all from the Bhagavad Gita.
Thank you.
Okay, you want to read?
Maharaj, I realized I sent the wrong document.
No Of course, what you sent me, there was nothing there.
And
At
then
least you
can-
sent something. you know. All
and,
right,
I
tomorrow.
just- yeah, I'll
Okay.
email the correct one.
Yeah. All right. So no more questions?
He has one question. He asked me that before. He's not satisfied with my answer.
What is it?
My question.
That's not a question. Is not a question.
If the government will not, if the government will get you in trouble if you stop going to school, how will you quit school?
No. You don't quit school. What you do is you do homeschooling, which is legal in Washington State. So that's your homework. You look up what homeschooling is in Washington State.
You
What?
do school in home.
Yes. That way your parents have a way of knowing what you're learning, and they can eliminate those things that they consider as nonsense. Okay?
Maharaj, in the next verse, third chapter, 41 verse, I think son is control the lust in the beginning. How do we define when we are in the beginning stage versus when we are completely taken away by the mind, intelligence, and senses, by the lust?
Your son is in a beginning state.
Okay.
So by bringing him to class, you bring his son almost every day to class, right?
Yes, Maharaj.
So he's going to learn a lot of things that way. Things that he would never hear anywhere else. Never. Right? And they're not, like kids things like, Dog Man or things. This is serious thing. It's heavy duty Bhagavad Gita. And he's learning it. Right? And even if he only learns a little bit of it, it's enough to wake him up to whenever he's exposed to nonsense, say, I don't accept the nonsense. So the sooner, the better.
Okay.
These kids are exposed to Bhagavad Gita as it is, the sooner the better.
And the hope for the grown-ups?
Well, if you have any hope for your kid, then you better quickly get straightened out yourself. Right?
Yeah,
You said you couldn't answer his question, right? So you got the answer just now.
yeah, he was not satisfied.
Okay,
I
he's
guess.
not satisfied. Are you satisfied with what I told you? But you have to do your homework now. You have to look up what is homeschooling.
It's school, but your dad and mom teach you.
Your dad and mom have control over what you're learning. Yeah. Right now they have no control. It's the Wild West, no control at all. They're teaching your kids things that are completely against what you believe in, but you have no control over it. Okay, so now we'll have Guru Puja, Hari Bol. That was a good question.
I'm not sure whether he asked the question to teacher and teacher said that the government will punish you, something like that.
Oh yeah, you asked your teacher, and she said they would punish you.
Yeah, they will not punish the kids, they'll punish the grown-up. Because it's not like a kid could drive to school by its own.
Well, your teacher is
Without
wrong.
driving-
Now you know your teacher is wrong. All they do is they want to scare you. They don't want to. They don't want to educate you. They just want to scare you. That's their technique. Scare little kids. Okay, who's going to sing? Wait a minute. Who's going to? You going to sing? No, he sings every day. What do you mean? He's here every day singing. No, wait a minute. Maybe you want to sing?
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakti Sadma
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 Bando moi savadana mate
Bando moi sabadana mate
Bando moi savadana mate
Bando moi sabadana mate
Jahara prasade bai he baba toriya jai
Nara Prasade Mai He Baba Doriya Jai
Krishna prapti hoy jaha hoite
Krishna Prapti Hoya Hoite
Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chite te koriya kya Arana kori ho mane asha
Arana Koriya Mane Asha
Arana kori ho mane asha
Arana Koriya Mane Asha
Shri Guru Charane Rati Aise Uttama Gati
Shri Guru Charane Rati Aise Uttama Gati
Je Prasadi Pure Sarva Asha चक्षुदान दिलो जय जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से चक्षुदान दिलो जय जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशित प्रेम भक्ति चाह होते अविद्या विनाश जाते वेदिकाय चाह रचरित श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु आदम जनार बंधु लोकेना लोकेरा जीवाना हा हा प्रभु करो दया देह मोरे पाद छाया
प्रभु कोरा दया दे मोरे पद छाया
हा हा प्रभु करो दया देह मोरे पाद छाया
प्रभु कोरा दया दे मोरे पद छाया
ए विजास कुशुक्ति भुवाना
शक्ति भुवाना
प्रभु पाद पतित पवाना
प्रभु पाद पतित पवाना
जय प्रभु पदा जय प्रभु पदा जय प्रभु पदा जय प्रभु पदा
जय प्रभु पद जय प्रभु पद जय प्रभु पद
Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Himati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine
Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Himati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine
Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Hasatyadishatarine
Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Askatyadishatarine
Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda
Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda
Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda
Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Statara Satara Shri Shri Shrimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Shri Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasudeva Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Sham Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Shri Mayapura Dham Ki Jai Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai Tulasi Devi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Ganga Maya Ki Jai Jamuna Maya Ki Jai Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Nitai Gaura Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Guru and Shri Guranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada Patita Bhavani Ki Jai Nama Om Vishnu Daya Krishna Vaishnava Buddha Smata Namaste Saraswati Devi Guruvani Chari Nivise Sasuri Paskati. The lotus feet of our spiritual master are the only way by which we can attain to pure devotional service. I bow down to his lotus feet with great awe and reverence. By his grace, one can cross the ocean of material suffering and obtain the mercy of Krishna. I have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from his lotus mouth. Attachment to his lotus feet is the perfection and fulfills all desires. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord, birth after birth. From him ecstatic prema emanates, by him ignorance is destroyed. The Vedic scriptures sing of his character. Our spiritual master is the ocean of mercy, the friend of the poor, Lord of the